Let's kick off with a quick mental image. Imagine you need someone to explain something complex, clearly, convincingly. Who comes to mind? Maybe someone, calm, approachable, like Barack Obama often gets mentioned for that. It seems likely many of us kind of gravitate towards that style.
That makes sense. That approachable clarity is definitely something people value.
Yeah, flip that. Think about those times your own communication felt, well, awful, like wading through mud.
Oh, yeah.
That job interview where your perfect answers just evaporated, or trying to get a brilliant idea across in a meeting and the words just wouldn't come out right. We've all had those moments, haven't we?
Absolutely. It's a remarkably common feeling, that sense of, falling short when it really matters. Almost universal, I'd say.
Exactly. But here's the thing. What if communicating well isn't some, magic talent only a few people have?
Yeah.
What if it's actually a set of learnable skills, real strategies, actual techniques you can start using, like today?
That's an interesting proposition. So not innate, but learned.
Right. And that's what we're exploring in this deep dive. We've been looking at insights from a YouTube discussion based on the book, How to Talk to Anyone. It offers these, 92 little tricks for success.
And these aren't about manipulation, right? More like practical tools.
Precisely. They're framed as practical tools to help you connect and just communicate better, in all parts of your life.
What I find interesting there is the focus on actionable steps. It's not just vague advice, it's actual techniques you can try.
Spot on. So our mission here is pretty straightforward. Pull out the core strategies, those practical tricks, to help you communicate better with anyone, anytime, anywhere.
Okay, a worthy goal. Where do we start?
Well, a logical place, and something the source material really highlights, is the power of those first few seconds, first impressions.
Ah, yes. They have a surprisingly long shelf life, don't they?
They really do. It's almost unsettling how fast people form opinions, like within seconds.
Judgments about trustworthiness, approachability.
Yeah, and a huge part of that initial gut feeling comes down to just your demeanor, how you present yourself.
And that quick assessment lines up with a lot of social psychology. Our brains are wired to quickly scan for cues, friend or foe, and visual stuff plays a massive role. It links to that halo effect too, doesn't it?
Right, where one good trait makes people assume other good traits. So this leads to one of those key tricks, mirroring.
Ah, yes, reflecting the other person.
Exactly. The source talks about subtly reflecting their behavior, facial expressions, posture, even like the pace and volume of how they're speaking.
It taps into our basic need to connect. We naturally mirror people we like or want to connect with, actually. It signals rapport, often subconsciously.
But you have to be subtle, right?
Oh, absolutely. Overdo it, and it just looks like you're mimicking them, which is awkward. Genuine engagement is key.
The source gives a really stark example of why matching the vibe matters. Imagine walking into, say, a funeral with a big smile.
Ooh, yeah, bad impression.
Right. Not because you're necessarily insensitive, but because your emotional display is completely out of sync with the room. It just reads as unaware or lacking empathy.
Exactly. Matching that emotional tone shows social intelligence, sensitivity, crucial for that positive first impression.
Okay, so beyond those first moments, let's dive into something absolutely fundamental. Listening.
The art of listening, yes. Foundational.
We all hear stuff, obviously, but the source breaks it down. There's hearing, then there's listening where you try to understand, and then there's active listening, understanding and responding thoughtfully.
And that last one, active listening, that's the tricky part for many of us. It takes real effort.
It really does. It requires you to be fully present, focused on them, not just waiting for your turn to jump in. We all know the basics, like nodding. But the source suggests some more powerful ways to show you're truly engaged.
Right. It emphasizes specific verbal cues, which I think is interesting. Not just nodding silently.
Yeah, like asking short, relevant questions during the conversation.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Like, if someone's talking about a problem, asking, so how did you end up tackling that, or what effect did that have? Shows you're processing it, you're curious.
Right, not just passively receiving. I've actually tried that more consciously, asking those follow-up questions, and it does seem to make the other person lean in more, changes the whole feel.
And then there are those short interjections.
Yes. Little verbal nods.
Exactly. Like, wow, that sounds intense, or yeah, I can see why you'd feel that way.
Yeah.
Little things that show you're connecting emotionally, understanding.
It signals empathy, basically.
Totally. And ultimately, the source really hammers home that good communication starts with that kind of listening. really trying to get where the other person is coming from, how they see things.
That understanding then shapes how you respond. It's the foundation.
Okay, let's switch gears. Let's talk about what we say without saying anything. Body language.
Ah, the nonverbals.
Yeah.
Hugely important. The source calls it a vital key, right? For understanding others and shaping the interaction.
Yeah. And even if we aren't consciously analyzing it, people pick up on these signals constantly, especially when they don't know you well.
Our brains are just wired for it.
So the source breaks it down into like 4 main areas. First, eye contact.
Classic. We all know it matters for confidence, sincerity.
But it can be hard, especially when you're nervous. People tend to look away.
True, but that avoidance can, unfortunately, signal a lack of confidence or sometimes even shiftiness, even if that's not intended. Appropriate eye contact shows you're engaged and open.
And the source offers a specific tactic here, making deliberate eye contact when you're making a request or stating something important.
Oh, that's interesting, to add weight.
Exactly. Like if you're setting a boundary or making a key point, that direct look reinforces the message.
Powerful technique. Okay, what's next after eyes?
Posture. The source talks about open versus closed.
Right. Open meaning taking up a bit more space, looking relaxed.
Yeah, signals confidence, approachability, versus closed, kind of shrinking inwards, maybe arms crossed, which can give off negative vibes like insecurity or defensiveness.
And people pick up on this incredibly quickly, almost instantly.
Then gestures, hand movements and such.
These have a dual purpose, don't they?
Yeah, the source points out they clarify things like counting on your fingers, but also make your communication, especially storytelling, more dynamic, more memorable.
They really bring words to life, help people visualize, engage more senses.
Totally. The source uses the example of telling an exciting story. Imagine doing it with lively gestures versus standing stiffly with arms at your sides.
Big difference in impact. The gestures help the listener almost feel it.
And there's a practical tip.
Yeah.
Imagine you're talking to someone who's hard of hearing. You'd naturally use more descriptive hand motions, but keep them fluid, not robotic.
Good tip. Makes it feel more natural.
And the last area.
Facial expressions. The source mentions the 6 basic emotions: joy, sadness, fear, disgust, anger, surprise. And how combinations create nuances, like excitement being joy plus surprise.
Right. And facial expressions are obviously key for showing emotion authentically.
They add that layer of sincerity, of depth.
And the source notes, people are often pretty good at spotting a fake smile versus a real one.
That's the Duchenne smile, isn't it?
Yeah.
The one that reaches the eyes. Research shows people do pick up on that authenticity, even if they can't articulate why.
Okay, so we've covered first impressions, listening, body language. Let's talk about building trust.
A cornerstone. Absolutely crucial.
The source uses a great analogy. Trust is like climbing a ladder, step by step.
I like that. It emphasizes that it's a process, not instant.
So the first rung is just initial acquaintance,
Yeah.
getting the basics, who is this person?
The starting point, establishing contact.
Then rung 2 is evaluation. The source calls it the testing phase. We're subconsciously asking, can I trust this person?
And we do this all the time, don't we? Watching for consistency between words and actions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then comes the filtration stage, basically figuring out if someone is reliable, dependable.
Do they do what they say they'll do? Punctuality, honesty, follow through, those kinds of things.
But the source stresses that real deep trust goes beyond just reliability. It's about connecting emotionally, authentically.
Yes. That emotional connection and empathy are vital, showing you genuinely understand and acknowledge their feelings, even if you disagree with their opinion.
And it makes a distinction between real empathy and just, saying the right words. It's not just I hear you, it's really getting it, validating their emotional state.
That authenticity is everything. People can usually sniff out fake empathy a mile off, and that actually destroys trust.
Good point. Okay, shifting slightly professionalism in the workplace, the source has some pretty direct advice here.
Which is?
Observe before you jump in, especially in a new environment.
Makes sense. Every workplace has its own communication culture, its own norms.
Totally. How colleagues talk to each other, how they talk to managers, how meetings work, even how they brainstorm together. It's all part of the unspoken rules.
And taking time to observe first shows respect for that existing culture. Helps you avoid blunders early on.
So rather than just imposing your style, the advice is listen, watch, figure out the lay of the land, then adapt and engage.
Smart strategy. Okay, what about influencing others? The source mentions something called intention labeling.
Yeah, this one's interesting. Intention labeling. It sounds maybe a bit calculated.
Maybe. How does it work?
The idea is you state your positive intention or the benefit of your idea before you actually present the idea itself.
Ah, okay, so you're framing it, highlighting the why first.
Exactly. You lead with a positive outcome.
Why is that effective?
It taps into that idea of shared purpose. If you start by saying, my goal here is to make things easier for everyone, or this approach could really boost our results, people are more likely to listen openly to the how.
I see. So the example given is proposing a new work plan.
Right. Instead of just launching into the details, you'd start by saying something like, I've been thinking about how we could increase our team's productivity, and I have an idea. Gets them on board with the goal first.
So it connects to creating that win-win. Showing them what's in it for them makes them more receptive. Makes sense.
Okay, finally, the source tackles something we all face, dealing with difficult people.
Ah, yes. The inevitable challenge. Because not everyone is easy to interact with.
Definitely not. Aggressive people, challenging personalities. They're out there.
And the key thing the source emphasizes here is self-management.
Meaning controlling your own emotional reactions.
Exactly. Your ability to stay calm and composed. The source uses a scenario like dealing with a colleague you just don't click with. Let's call him Ahmed.
Right.
The crucial thing is not letting your personal feelings about Ahmed dictate how you interact professionally.
Easier said than done sometimes.
For sure. That's why emotional control is so important. Reacting emotionally often just makes things worse, right? Escalates things.
So what does this source suggest?
Using predetermined neutral behaviors, like maintaining a calm, maybe even slightly relaxed facial expression, even if you're feeling annoyed.
Like a poker face?
Sort of, yeah. A buffer. Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you rattled.
And focus on the facts.
Yes. Keep the focus objective on the task, the issue, the facts at hand. Avoid getting dragged into personal arguments or emotional stuff. Steer it back to the work.
That helps depersonalize it. Makes it easier to find common ground, maybe.
Exactly. The source also mentions the long-term value of building skills like anger management and general emotional stability.
These are just good life skills, really.
Absolutely. Useful everywhere. And related to that is understanding your own personal triggers.
What sets you off specifically?
Right. Knowing what pushes your buttons helps you anticipate your reactions and choose a more constructive response instead of just, reacting on impulse.
Self-awareness is key.
Totally. The bottom line is you will encounter difficult people. It's normal. So having some strategies ready beforehand is just smart.
Preparation and self-awareness seem like the main tools there.
Definitely your most powerful assets in those tricky situations.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it really feels like the core message is, well, communication skills are just vital, aren't they? And they're not static. They change as society changes.
Absolutely. Continuous learning, being adaptable, that's key in today's world.
And putting in the effort to improve these skills, it can genuinely make a big difference.
Yeah.
Better relationships, more success at work.
For sure. Mastering these little tricks, these techniques, can really boost your confidence and your ability to connect, to navigate all sorts of situations more effectively.
So for you listening, maybe take a second. Which of these ideas really struck a chord? Which strategy feels like it could make a real difference for you?
Yeah, that's the question to ponder. How might consciously trying just one of these things, maybe that active listening with short questions or deliberate eye contact next time you ask for something, how might that actually change how your next important conversation goes?
That's your challenge, really. Give it a try. Experiment a little, see what happens. Communication's always a work in progress, isn't it?
Always more to learn.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.